Good morning. You are on. What's your opinion? Please go right ahead.
Hi there. This is Sam Petsonk. I am the Democratic. Yes, I'm a Democratic candidate for Attorney General.
Good morning,
here in West
sir.
Virginia.
We're glad to hear from you, and we're glad to have you on. I'm going to just go straight into it and ask you to tell us who you are and why we should vote for you for Attorney General.
Well, I appreciate that. You know, I was born up in Morgantown. I live out in Fayette County now. I'm a lawyer. I'm a labor lawyer. I've represented hundreds, probably thousands now of coal miners and other working people across West Virginia fighting for black lung benefits, retirees' health care, severance pay after large layoffs across our state. You know, Lord knows we've been struggling with that for a long time now. I had the good fortune to work for U.S. Senator Robert C. Byrd for the last 3 years that he was in the United States Senate. And so I learned a lot from Senator Byrd about how to prioritize our people. And that's why I'm in this race. You know, I think we've had an attorney general for the last 8 years now who has really dropped the ball on us. We've had tens of thousands of people lose their jobs, lose retirement health care. Nobody at the state has really been there fighting for us. And you know that we have a major addiction crisis that has spiraled out of control over that time period. And so I'm focused on litigating to recover funds for our state, to provide treatment beds, and to support long-term recovery, to make sure that we have the support through workforce, through rehabilitation services, to help people get back in the workforce, hold down a job, get back with their families. Those are the sources of long-term stability that will help us beat the addiction crisis. And the Attorney General should be leading the charge. That's what I've done in my law practice, and that's why I would like your support. I believe we will win this race, and I hope that I can earn the votes of your listeners.
We are in an area where the aftermath or the after effects of this opioid crisis have been, we've been hit the hardest. And we've had a decimated population and a decimated economy and a crime rate and all these other things. I mean, there's at least 100 different things that we can associate to the opioid epidemic that sort of started here and was worse here than most places. Would you still consider that? And I'm talking about in terms of the law and legally. Is that still our top concern in the state of West Virginia?
I think it is. You know, I mean, I think certainly we want to work to grow our economy, bring in new infrastructure. I have tried in my law practice to work with county commissions and to try to get the Attorney General to support the expansion of broadband around our state. I mean, we need to keep our eyes on the future and build that infrastructure to help our communities thrive. But as far as our law enforcement priorities, as far as my focus in the Attorney General's office, immediately and in the near term, you're absolutely right. The addiction crisis is at the top of mind, and I've written about it in my law practice. I've worked with the WVOW Law School, and I've worked to educate lawyers around the state about how to advocate for people in long-term recovery to ensure that they can get back in the workforce, back with their families. Those are the sources of long-term stability that we really need to achieve in order to beat the addiction problem. And so I think that if I were the Attorney General, you can rest assured that I would be there working with the Human Rights Commission, working with the Workforce Office, working with the rehabilitation services to support people who are clean, who are making it through long-term recovery. You know, and of course we always have to do more through litigation to bring in the funds to support treatment and to protect, you know, insurance and counseling services for people who are going through recovery. We've dropped the ball on all of that, and that's what I do in my law practice. I'm a class action labor and employment attorney, and that's what our state should be seeing from the people's lawyer, that is our Attorney General.
I would go on to the next thing, but I've been told by very smart people who are expert in all the arenas I'm about to say. They've all told me that you need to have law enforcement and prevention, and that's two of the prongs you need to solve this. But the other one is long-term treatment, and we just don't have enough of that. So in order to fund that, you're talking about litigation to make what a lot of people would say are the people responsible for this epidemic, which would be some of the pharmaceutical companies who flooded the place with all these pills.
I am talking about that, but I'm also talking about much more. We need to protect the federal funding that we have for long-term recovery services. We have, over the last 10 years, we've greatly expanded the federal Medicaid program so that those dollars can go to support our recovery services. And that is critical that we protect that federal funding source. You know, this addiction crisis costs our state billions of dollars annually, and we don't have all the money in our budget here in West Virginia to pay for those services. And so we need some of that federal money. We got to protect that. And I would be focused on protecting that federal support for addiction services. And then I'll also look to the private sector, to insurance carriers and to employers. If you have an employee in your, who is struggling with long-term recovery, but who is staying clean, we need to ensure that the private sector does its part and supports, make sure that, employer-provided health insurance covers those services as well to help people stay in the workforce and stay productive. So it's not just about litigation, although that's key. We also need to protect the federal monies, and we need to ensure that the private sector is playing its part to help people stay in the workforce and stay clean long term.
The criminality involved in suffering from addiction ends up being a lot of times almost like a life sentence. In terms of never being able to recover from both the economic and social stigma of having been an addict, but being able to break out of that cycle. What you're talking about is giving them a break out of that cycle.
Exactly, and we think that holding down a productive job is one of the best ways to beat stigma and to overcome the unaffordability of treatment. You know, the two biggest barriers to success with long-term recovery are stigma and unaffordability. The Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration at the federal level, they study this. What are the barriers to success? And that's it. So if we can get people reunited with their families and we can give them the accommodation and the support that they need to stay in the workforce and stay productive, I believe we will see greater and greater success over time with the addiction crisis, and we'll turn the tide. And we haven't been doing it. I think we have not heard the first thing from our Attorney General about any of what I'm discussing. In fact, if anything, he's been out there trying to attack that federal support for these critical programs in our state. So we've got to get right. We've got to litigate, we've got to protect those federal dollars, and we have to be smart about supporting people in long-term recovery so that they can avoid stigma, they can hold down a job, they can afford the counseling and the support services to stay clean and stay successful. We desperately need all of that to happen, and the Attorney General can lead the way.
Another thing that would fall under the Attorney General's purview, and it has a specific effect in West Virginia because we have such an elder population, are both telephone and internet scams. They're a constant problem, and there's not a whole lot of ability for law enforcement to fight some of this. What do we do about that? I know that the Attorney General. The Attorney General's office tends to send out warnings about that, but again, those don't get to everybody, and some of these scammers are quite good at what they do. How do we address this situation?
Well, the Attorney General has two important roles when it comes to consumer protection. One is he can educate, but he can also litigate. And so when we learn about scams and fraud perpetrated against our people, I know I've worked with the consumer protection lawyers, and I've worked in the public interest nonprofit legal services program, and we prioritize consumer protection in that practice. And so I held a fellowship in the Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division number probably 6-8 years ago, and so I've been in there. I know how they operate, and we need to litigate to protect people from that kind of fraud, and that's part of the Attorney General's job. The other thing that the Attorney General should do in that connection is enforce our antitrust law, which means to protect small online businesses so that their business is not stolen away by these larger big box retailers, and we need to protect both our consumers from being victimized online, but also our small businesses, because small business plays an important role, and they can be preyed upon by internet scammers just like you and I as consumers. So we need to do all of that.
That happens far too frequently as well. Now, we're just about to run out of time, so I wanted to give you a couple of minutes here if there was something you wanted to talk about that I didn't bring up, or any kind of final thing you'd like to say to everybody.
Well, I appreciate that. I think one more point on the drug crisis, another reason why we need to be smart with long-term recovery. You mentioned law enforcement, and law enforcement is key in fighting the drug crisis. But right now, our counties are so overflowing. Our jails are filled up and overflowing that we can't even afford to incarcerate additional offenders. So we need to strengthen the hand of law enforcement is another reason that we need to get smart at diverting people, getting them out of jail, back into the workforce, and into long-term recovery. So there's a direct law enforcement interest in what I'm discussing as well to help us succeed with getting tougher and smarter on crime. But more broadly, we need to protect health insurance for our people. I've litigated to protect retirees' health insurance for coal miners and a lot of other people across West Virginia. The Attorney General should lead the way on protecting people with pre-existing conditions, protecting access to health insurance for people in our state. Our Attorney General has been doing just the opposite. He's been out there attacking the laws that protect people with pre-existing conditions. So I will be supporting good access to affordable health care. Our rural health clinics need our support. And I also, I've been there fighting for public schools. I litigated against the school building authority to force them to fund our Fayette County school system up where I live, and we need to do better at supporting our teachers, supporting our children in our schools, our community schools. That's our future. And so I will be very focused on working with the Department of Ed, the SBA, and the state board to ensure that we do right by school children and by our educators to protect our future. Those are some of my key areas of focus: wage and hour, health care, public education, and fighting the addiction crisis, along with consumer protection and protecting small businesses through the antitrust division, like you discussed earlier. So this office really matters. I hope people will come out. I am a Democrat. I'll be on the ballot in May, and I'll be on the ballot in November. With your support, I hope that we can win this office. There's a lot to do, and you can read about it on my website, samforwv.com, sam4wv.com.
We've been speaking to Democrat Attorney General candidate Sam Petsonk. Sir, we appreciate your time, and we hope to talk to you again as we get closer to the election.
I thank you as well very much.
Thank you so much for the time. This has been What's Your Opinion on WVOW.
Here's NACO foster parent Joseph Williamson.
We met our first foster child, and she was really angry, and I could see it. And my experiences as a foster child was intense anger for not having someone to care. And I knew when she looked at me and I told her that she was going to be okay. I felt like she believed it, and then I knew that we was doing the right thing.
If you would like to know how we build families, please visit NACO.org or give us a call, 304-752-7830.
At this time.